Hello, everybody. Welcome to Drunk with Questions. I'm Gooch.
And I'm Raj. Join us as we navigate the complexities of life. Here, alcohol may not be the answer, but it's sure as hell worth a shot.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Drunk with Questions, the talk show where ordinary people talk about extraordinary topics. I can't say what I want to say. With me today is Raj and Tim. I can't. I can't. Nope, I'm not gonna.
You might get canceled.
Yeah, that one could have been really bad. I was gonna say the only guy that I know that's lived in the closest proximity to monkeys of anybody that I know.
I mean, that's probably true. I mean,
I think it is. Yeah.
Yes. That's not that bad. What were you so worried about?
I don't know, man.
The
like
backlash from our one Indian consumer.
I mean, it's one of those things, right? Like, you got to be careful. But I wasn't like insinuating anything. It just, when I was thinking of it in my head, it seemed like I was, and I'm like, yeah, I got to be careful how I say that. So, anyways,
No.
yes, no, yeah. So the one guy that I know that's lived in the closest proximity to monkeys of anybody that I know, it's Raj. Everybody, Raj.
Hey, everybody.
What's
How
up?
are you? I'm doing well. Yes, he is correct. I'm from the jungles of India. I grew up along monkeys like Mowgli, according to Mike. Monke. Yeah.
Monke.
Yeah, I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
I'm pretty good. Yeah, Tim, welcome.
Yes, thank you.
So we got
we missed
Timothy
you
here. Yes, Timothy
Been a
has
minute.
been missing for the last 5 or 6 episodes. He's tried very hard to end his own life. It seems doing everything possible to endanger himself and others.
Tim, tell the people what you did.
Wasn't even by choice. Well, I finally got my wisdom teeth out, so I'm a little bit dumber than I was before. And, then my body decided to reject some of the meds that they had me on and put me in the hospital for like a good solid day and a half. So that was fun.
This guy, because we all live within fairly close proximity to each other. Me and Tim are extremely close to each other. He didn't even have the balls or the intellect at the time of his worst hive outbreak to call me or my fiance to come get him. Nor did he call an ambulance. So when he got to the ER, his BP was his pulse ox, so literally the oxygen in his blood was 80, which is bad. People die from that, in case the listeners don't know. And his heart rate was 170, which people also die from. So, yeah.
It just wasn't my time.
We're all glad you're here, Tim. His eyes were pretty swollen, too, so...
Yeah, speaking of natural selection
drive.
and evolution, he was trying to deselect himself from the natural breeding program.
That was aggressive Darwinism attempt, and he just...
This isn't the first time. And when I was a kid, my body decided to also stop producing blood. Like, my bone marrow just stopped making itself, and I was going into liver and kidney and main organ failure. And then I was going to have some bone marrow tests. And the day that I was supposed to have the surgery, my blood level shot back up to normal when it was super low the day before.
Why is your body trying to kill itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. At this point, I figured I have 7 lives left if I was a cat. So,
dude, it's like Osmosis Jones. You guys ever remember Osmosis Jones?
Dude, I just watched a YouTube video on the spin-off TV show that they had, because I remember seeing it, but it's one of those things where it's like, was that actually a thing? And this guy was reviewing all these old kids TV shows that we used to watch, and I was like, holy crap, I do remember that. And he was like, this is why it ended. And I'm like, that's stupid, man, because that taught me probably the most about the human body at that age than any movie. I'm being serious.
Osmosis Jones taught me human biology.
Yeah, man. That was a good movie. They talk about lymph nodes. They talk about freaking the difference between like a heart attack and what viruses do to you. And obviously there's, unrealistic parts, but
Tim's got a guy inside him with that little fucking finger.
the claw.
Just
Yes.
poking things. He's like, bone marrow?
Oh shit. Sorry, Tim. You're gonna be the next what do I want to say? The next movie guy for sure.
Look at Osmosis Jones, dude. I remember whenever our science teacher was too lazy to teach, that would be one of the movies on cycle. It was that Bill Nye the Science Guy or some like stupid biology movie they'd make us watch.
I know.
So today, guys, we want to talk about evolution. I know this is a hot button topic only in the United States because every other country, takes science seriously. But well, I wanted to talk about some of the things that we like about the theory of evolution, some of the trippy stuff that we run into when it comes to theory of evolution. We have a lot of knowledge about how we came to be, but there seems to be a lot of people that want to go in and go ahead and say, that can't be right. I mean, I worked with people that wanted to tell me and believed in their heart of hearts that the Earth was only 2,000 years old. And I didn't really know if I had the energy to go against it or if I should just let it ride, because I wanted to have a discussion with the guys here and kind of talk about, what is it about the evolution and the theory of evolution that makes people want to not believe in it or kind of throw shame at it and feel like it's not correct.
So I'll definitely let Tim go after that one with how we know he stands. I think just coming from a guy who did study science at the collegiate level, right? But also knows some of the quirks of it as well. So the first thing that I would put out is people just don't want to believe or think that they're directly descended from like monkeys, right? Although technically it's not like chimpanzees became us. We all have a common ancestor and we split at that point.
It's a different branch of the tree. Yeah.
Right. What I will say now, although I don't believe the Earth is only 2,000 years old, I know it's older than that. But I do know that there is a significant issue with carbon dating. Although the breakdown of the isotopes and everything, we can get a pretty good guess. And usually they say like, it's between this million years and this million years, which isn't that good of a guess, really, if you think about like how finite we can deduct certain things now. I know that at a certain point, carbon dating actually gets pretty fuzzy. And I can understand why people would be suspicious or concerned about how we can accurately say 65 million years ago, right? I mean, what if it was actually only 45 million years ago? That would be a pretty big difference.
It is. And I think one of the things that when I was talking to my coworker that she brought up is that this book she was reading, this pastor decided to do an experiment where he took a dress and he made it look old and apparently sent it out for carbon testing to see how old it was, and it came back that it was like 150 years old. Here's the thing: carbon dating is going to give you time periods. It's not very good at showing how old stuff is that's closer to us. It's very good when it comes to stuff that's way further away. Like when you test something that's in the last 100 years, carbon dating it hasn't left enough traces for carbon dating to even be anywhere near accurate. But if you check for something 10,000 years, 20,000 years, 500,000 years from now, it's going to give you a better idea of the actual time period in which this object is from.
So the other big argument too that I'll lay out before I let Tim go all Christianity and Jesus on it.
Praise.
We gotta bear in mind too that so the first dinosaur fossil that was found or identified as a bone of something that used to be alive, I guess would be a good way to put it, was found just shortly after George Washington died. So we're talking like the 1790s, 1800s, right? Which is crazy to think about because that really wasn't that long ago, right? Um, and then you look back at a lot of these pictures and like pictures that even medieval people drew, or pictures from Samaria, or even cave paintings sometimes. And some of these pictures depict animals that we would consider dinosaurs. I'm not talking about like woolly mammoths or woolly rhinos or anything. Like I'm talking like legitimate like dinosaurs, large reptiles. And I can see how if you only looked at those, you'd be like, okay, maybe dinosaurs were actually closer to humans than we want to actually think about. You know what I mean?
One thing I want to say before Tim takes over. I'm sorry, Tim. I know we keep delaying you over and over
Oh, that's
again,
fine.
but piggybacking on what Gooch said. So the one thing we know about early art and like cave painting is their aspect in terms of size differential was pretty bad.
Right.
When they painted woolly mammoths, they painted them the same size as human beings. So like we can't really take into account these could have been just normal sized lizard, and one dude decided he wanted to draw a big lizard instead of a small lizard like his friend.
Right. All right, Tim, take it away, brother.
All right, so I'm Christian, and I believe in creation, intelligent design, God. As far as evolution goes, I don't think I came from a monkey or some primordial soup that just so happened to, over billions of years, meet every potential statistical breaking method to go from a single cell organism to a multifunctional cell organism, human being thought process, all the firings within our brain that we still don't even understand to this day, and to say that we originated from a type of ape and all that within the timeline just wouldn't make sense. If you're talking like a macroevolution level, then you're going from, your standard typical where you have like the ape and then the different humanoids up to modern day human. It's macroevolution. If it was an actual thing, we would still continue to see all of these developments going on in today's society and the world. Humans would just continue to evolve. Humans have relatively been the same for millennia, right? Typical written history, like 2,000 years in a human isn't really any different than we were back then. Monkeys are still monkeys. Humans are still humans. A crocodile is still a crocodile, right? From the Nile River during the Egyptians prior to Christ's birth is still the same crocodile you see in the river. There's been no evolutionary process there. Even Darwinism has been scientifically proven as wrong. And Darwin said that if his findings were inaccurate, to stop following it. There are microevolutions, a man and a woman have a child. That child is an evolution of their two genetic strains. You see different scientific advancements. This is medications, understanding food and health, create longevity, but it doesn't explain why in biblical times people were living a couple hundred years. And then over that portion from that time, like I think, is it Moses or Noah? They're actually quite old before they died. But then, lifespans from there significantly decrease, or if you were 30 years old, I mean, you were going to kick the bucket probably relatively soon if you made it that far, whatever, war, famine, disease. And now, average lifespan for a male is about 75, 76, or 77, 78 for a female. As far as microevolution, it is there. Breeding dogs, breeding cats. Most dog species are some form of microevolutionary change from when wolves were becoming domesticated, finding different characteristics and traits and breeding those to continuously breed out bad traits, breed good traits. So that's definitely a thing because it's continued today. As far as timeline goes, it's still very, I mean, we've talked about this before in other episodes. Time is literally relative, right? Einstein. Time differs. Time's created by man. God created the earth in 7 days. 7 days, we figure 24 hours a day. You know, on the seventh day, God rested. I think time is what God determined it at that point. He also would not have created things without history, right? Well, the chicken or the egg came first. Well, probably would have created a full chicken, right? Just as he created Adam from the earth in the image of God, Eve still in the image of God, but from Adam. And then, you know, fall of man, there's Cain and Abel. One thing that I've kind of been looking into more is, all right, so you have Adam and Eve, first humans on earth, Garden of Eden, when Eve, you know, took the forbidden fruit, sinned, caused the Garden of Eden to rise up to the heavens, which would have been probably somewhere in the Middle East. That's what they're recording biblically. I think that it's very possible that there would have been other people, you know, Cain and Abel, I believe, were both married. Can't remember how like the lineage breaks down. Then, you know, fast forward a bit, Tower of Babel, everybody's there. God tears the tower down, spreads his people out across the world to different languages, you know, different cultures, civilizations. Could explain why like the pyramids in Egypt match a similar building pattern to the pyramids in like South America, Central America, because they all initially originated from a core area globally. Scientifically, I think Pangea, right? Still talking evolution, Pangea, all continents were one, could have theoretically been completely true, right? We don't know how long it took. Nobody was alive then to tell us. Could have been a rapid shift. Yeah, and we're still seeing plates move. I mean, that's a scientific based fact, just as the flood has been scientifically proven. Other religions like Muslims do believe Jesus was a person. They believe the miracles that he occurred were miracles derived from God. And, you know, so I guess all of these aspects are so specifically given that evolutionary traits like you know, coming from primordial soup to where we are today, I don't think would be possible. Like statistically possible, we somehow were, if it were true, we were an absolute anomaly in the universe if we're alone, that we came from, you know, random carbon particles smashing together to spontaneously creating organisms to where we are today. You know, just as again, Earth is tilted at a specific angle. Our atmosphere has all the specific components. Like if we were tilted just slightly more one way or the other, had slightly less oxygen, nitrogen, or hydrogen in the atmosphere. That's why we live in what scientists call the Goldilocks zone around a sun. We're not too far, we're not too close. Just for everything to happen as precise as it has by pure chance, I don't think would be possible. And there are a lot of scientists who still say, like, even though they're atheists, right? They can't disprove an intelligent design any more than they can prove that Big Bang actually happened.
True.
Both are theories, that you can't provide me evidence Big Bang happened, as I can't provide you evidence that intelligent design occurred. And like dinosaurs, for something to be fossilized like that, right? And some of like the eggs that have been fossilized, for fossilization to occur to that extent had to be an absolutely catastrophic event. Like Machu Picchu when it exploded, right? And their mummies that were preserved underneath the ash. That was a catastrophic event that allowed a similar preservation that would have allowed like bones. Things are still going to decomp, as they're covered with mud and organic matter. As we all know, like bones are super strong, but for the layers that dinosaurs are typically found in, whether it was like a mass extinction event or they were, say, like, right, dinosaurs potentially interacted with a human at some point, it could have been possible, and humans would have, maybe in different areas hunted them. Who knows, right? Cave drawings again. Was it like a Komodo dragon, or was it like a T-Rex?
So Tim, so what do you believe? Do you believe the Earth is the 4.5 billion years old, or do you believe that it's 2,000 years old, like it says in the biblical?
uh Technically, like Christianity, biblically speaking, it would be like, I think anywhere from, I think it was 10 to 15,000 years old. um I honestly don't know. I think it's an answer that, or the answer to that question would be, there's no way to actually prove how old it is, right? Because carbon dating, the half-life of the carbon element, they've found that it does change. Even like oxygen levels within the atmosphere, right? They suspect that oxygen during the time of the dinosaurs, the percentage compared to all the other gases was significantly higher, which would have created significantly larger reptiles and animals. And that's been shown in oxygen rich environments. Plants grow significantly larger than they do in a standard like open air environment today. So as far as answering that question, I I don't know. I don't really have a specific answer. It's completely probable that the Earth would be, 4.5 billion years, whatever. Macroevolution could not occur within that time frame, I fully believe. But at the same time, people are like, diamonds are created, take, however long to create, because they require, a certain temperature, right? A certain amount of pressure to compress the carbon elements together. And then we can just all of a sudden create it in a lab within hours,
It's
right?
it's it's not ours. It takes time for diamonds to be created, but also it's because we understand how the natural law works, right? So say that the Earth is 6.5 billion years. We believe in carbon dating and that's correct, which I personally do. Like I said, I'm not saying that you're wrong or Gooch is wrong. I'm just saying, in my personal belief, Earth is 6.5 billion years old. I can put trust in carbon dating to the point where it can pretty much tell us how long ago the Earth itself as a planet formed. We look at humans as a species. Humans have a species based on carbon dating have been around for 200,000 years. Compare that to 4.5 billion years. That's a factor of 22,500 times. So if you asked why we haven't evolved much in the past 200,000 years, 200,000 years is a blink of an eye. It matters nothing to the actual age of the Earth based on 4.5 billion years. So the first primordial soup where things were being created happened anywhere from 3.7 to 4 billion years ago. So that is not a small period of time. We're not talking about 100 years and then all of a sudden we went from a soup of atoms and molecules into multicellular organism. We're talking about 300 million years. And we've been around for 200,000. 300 million years to 200,000 years. So that's the amount of time it took for all those molecules to be in that soup and eventually join into links, turn into proteins, eventually take those proteins, turn them into complex proteins, and those proteins created the molecules that eventually turn into microorganisms. And these were just like single cellular, not even single, these were strains of DNA basically running around that eventually turned into something bigger. So we talk about the scale of time. Like you talk about the statistics of how it's not possible for the macro evolution to happen. 4.5 billion years is a long time for millions of different combinations to happen, millions of different combinations that will fail, and the one that doesn't fail then goes into the future and creates more, or the one that doesn't fail survives the environment that it's in and more of that type is created, or more of that type survives, which leads into further evolution. So 4.5 billion years, based on that number, we are not even significant. And we talk about why haven't we evolved? We haven't lived for most of human civilization. We have shaped our environment, and the environment hasn't shaped us. That's the biggest difference. Evolution happens when the environment chooses that you are not fit to be in that environment. So you have to either change or the environment will kill you. Whereas what we as humans have done that has changed, that no other species has done, is that we have changed the environment to fit our needs. So then we don't have a need to evolve. Why do we need to evolve if we can change the environment into however we want? We don't need to fit the environment. The environment will fit to us. So that's my commentary to you, and I want Tim and Gooch to take over and kind of give their idea.
So I like super dove into the primordial soup, but I mean, just today there's an estimated 2,400 different types of mammals alone across 15 different familia species. And so at what point did the soup decide I'm gonna be a tree? I'm gonna be a dog or a wolf.
That's misconstruing. That's misconstruing the actual the process that they're explaining, right? Because it's not just like you went from simple molecules into a tree. It's the whole idea of the evolution is we all have a common ancestor, and we are the progenitors of that ancestor going forward. So those molecules formed into single cell organisms, and those single cell organisms eventually, either on terrestrial land or in the ocean, became either the foliage that we see or became the animals that move around that are sentient. But that doesn't mean that you just go from the soup deciding that you are going from molecule to tree and molecule to animal. It takes trial and error, and 4.5 billion years of trial and error. So, I mean, I think we can't be disingenuous to the point where we're saying that the soup is deciding that we're becoming something, right?
I think one of the things that's getting a little confused between both of you is you're actually mixing macro and micro evolution together. So oh man, dude, this is gonna hurt me to explain it this way. I'm gonna explain it as simple monkey brain possible I can. Yeah. So we have the soup, okay? And like Raj said, he said it exactly right. The theory is that the water that was on Earth at the time of this occurring, that there was also a lot of storms, and those storms had lightning. Crazy, right? So what occurred is, with so much shit in the water, when the lightning would strike, there was always this like slight probability that it would basically defibrillate something into life. That is the most monkey way I can say it. All right. And by pure happenstance, and I will give you that, Tim. It is very difficult to believe that, but by pure happenstance, that's what happened. Things got defibrillated, and they started being things. That's, again, monkey brain way to explain it. As these things continued to get more complex, they started as very simple. Then they became amino acids. Then they became proteins. And they decided, hey, we work out together a lot more if we're all in the same area. So they created a cell membrane. Now you have single-celled organisms. Now these organisms are swimming around doing their thing. Bear in mind that now, once we get to this point, we can start actually intermingling microevolution with macroevolution. So as these microbes continue to move on with their lives, certain things are going to be more beneficial than others, right? So the microbe that has a flagella or something that can help it move around, cilia, is going to be more beneficial than something that can't do that. It relies on the water to move it. And we know that microbes, from what we see now, they reproduce very quickly, right? We can all agree on that. Very short spans. And so it's not out of the realm of possibility now that something would either divide or whatever with an imperfection that for everything else would have been weird, but for it was beneficial. So anyways, fast forwarding more. Now these cells are by themselves, they're starting to move, and all of a sudden they decide, for whatever reason, you know what? It's more beneficial for us to work together. So there's actually a plant now. I got to remember what it's called. It starts with a V, I believe. It might be Volvox, but so there's a plant that's alive now, and it is actually a circular clump of many cells, but all the cells are actually their own thing. It's not one organism, it's just a bunch of cells together working together. Sponges are technically just a bunch of cells that are together. A sponge is not its own thing, it's just a bunch of things put together because it was more beneficial for them. This in turn would give rise to the possibility of those cells together being washed up onto shore and becoming less and less reliant on the water. And I'm going to go the plant route here because the plant route is way more believable than an animal route. Once those plants get on shore, they're basically like a slime mold, right? That slime mold would slowly but surely become less reliant on the water, and it could move into more terrestrial areas, eventually becoming grass. Moss actually is exactly what it would be, and then it could become grass, and then it could become a bigger leafy brush. And bear in mind again that if you are competing with a bunch of other grass, being the tallest grass is going to be more beneficial to you, right? You're going to be closer to the sun. You're going to get more sun, which explains height. And again, this is microevolution. This is not something that has to come from the soup. It's just that would be more beneficial. If two grasses bred and one it was taller, it would be way more beneficial and it'd probably propagate more. Eventually you'd get to like a brush, and then you're like, hey man, this stem that I have that's literally just cells and isn't covered in bark or anything is killing me. So as soon as there's some sort of a genetic mutation where the cells are more rigid and have that barky texture, that's going to propagate. Again, it's going to survive longer than other things. So it's a lot of time to get to a tree, right? But it wasn't just a tree. It started out as these things and it had to go up. So I think that's kind of just what I wanted to clarify. Even though it is a long term, we are still talking about forms of microevolution that could occur. Honestly, a bush getting bark is just as likely as a wolf becoming a corgi, to me, at least.
See, like one thing. So, let's just do like dinosaurs. Yeah, 65 million years ago, right? Let's say the asteroid theory is correct. Wiped out the dinosaurs and the majority of life, essentially on Earth. So then you had, let's say the Earth is, 6.5 billion years old. So from say the Big Bang, where something was created out of nothing, and we go through the soup phase, get to, I don't know, let's do like 40 million years before dinosaurs die off, right? So then you got another 25 million years. Boom, asteroid comes flinging through the universe, smack stab right on Earth, and wipes out life. And then we start over.
It's not a start over. So once again, that we have to be very careful on how we say this. Life did not start over. Life still survived, but the bigger animals did not survive, because that's what happens. It literally turned the sky dark from all the material it spewed into the atmosphere, and the bigger animals that survived on the bigger foliage growing, the plants providing nutrition, those bigger herbivores died off from starvation. Once those herbivores die off, the predators have nothing to eat. They eventually die off. But the smaller animals, the shrews, I believe, are like the things that most likely survived in those areas.
Yeah.
Those shrews did survive because it didn't need as much food. And eventually, once the natural predators are gone, these animals will then have the ability to breed more, have a higher population. Those higher populations will allow more variety to form. So if one shrew ends up being twice the size of the others, it will outcompete the other shrews in mating, eating, whatever it does. And then eventually you just get bigger and bigger mammals versus bigger and bigger reptiles. The earth started getting colder because the sun was not penetrating as much. These lizards and these animals that relied on heating themselves and being energetic based on the warmth of the sun were not able to survive like mammals were. And we talk about, the time frame of this stuff happening. It's not like all of a sudden the asteroid hit, wiped everything out, and everything was dead in the next day. It still took hundreds of years for these animals, hundreds and thousands of years for these animals to die off completely and make it so that our common ancestor, the shrew or whatever it was, allowed it to propagate and be able to run around the earth freely to actually do what it needs to. A bacteria. So as of now, the earth has about
You muted yourself.
So as of now on earth, there is about 5 million trillion bacteria, and each bacteria replicates at a rate of between, each bacteria will turn into and split and turn into another bacteria between 4 and 10 minutes. So you have 5 million trillion bacteria replicating at a rate of 4 to 10 minutes over the course of 300 million years. So you think about how many different variations that can happen. That's why, like, when you talk about statistically it's not possible, it is statistically possible, because the number of mutations and reproductions that were happening during that time is a number that we can't even understand. So like when the asteroid hit, animals, the bigger animals died. Those shrews were able to reproduce. Say that they reproduce at the same rate as pigs do, which is what, every 3 times a year pigs can reproduce. Even that's like, it's the base amount we're going by. If they do, then each litter has, most rodents have anywhere from 6 to 10 animals every single time they have a litter. It's a lot of possibilities.
So, I guess hypothetically, right? If I were to survive for the next 65 million years, how many times could I breed bacteria before it wasn't bacteria?
So I will say this, because I was going to say it, but now you're bringing it up. In the Tree of Life, bacteria are the first big branch off between our common ancestor or the origin of life. And that's exactly where we split from aerobic and anaerobic stuff. But bacteria are the only thing that can be anaerobic, which is there's absolutely no, or aerobic, which means there's no, they don't need oxygen to survive, right? So everything in that category, even though it's actually decently large, it's all bacteria and a couple other tiny things. Everything else is anaerobic. We all need oxygen to survive. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just, so bacteria is going, you have these little shrews and whatnot, and all this crazy evolution stuff is occurring between a shrew and the first ape that decided to stand up from crawling on all four to Neanderthals who mysteriously disappeared or were murdered to extinction by humanoids, and then all of a sudden we're here. I just wonder, like, if I was able to live for 65 million years, how long could I continue to breed my dog before it became something else?
I agree with you, actually.
Yeah. One thing I do want to bring up is you're talking about how long it would take for bacteria to be something else. It doesn't have to be something else. It can just be a better version of itself. That's the whole point of evolution. So so let's take a look. I'm going to bring up COVID. I know it's a hot button topic. When you look at pathogens and bacteria and viruses that eventually become something that's a normal day thing, right?
Like the common cold used to be way more severe. Yeah,
exactly. So as it reproduces, it produces versions of itself that is less lethal to the host, because it has to learn to become less lethal. Otherwise, the bacteria will kill the host so fast that they won't be able to reproduce.
Yeah,
so that's evolution. You're seeing evolution happen right there, but in a short period of time. We went from the original COVID virus to the Omicron virus, which is like the least lethal. It's like a flu in your body in the span of 2 years. So you want to talk about evolution happening in front of your eyes? You just watched it happen in the last 2 years, right?
Oh yeah, no, that's a scientifically proven fact of the evolution of a virus is always significantly worse when it was originally formed in a lab and then released and eventually made its way through the world. And as it kept evolving, because a virus needs a host to survive, and if it kills its host, the virus ceases to exist. I mean, that's basic scientific fact that everybody's seen over the past 2 years. But the question is, that's a virus, right? And that's happened with the flu. It's happened with the common cold now. But as far as coming from a primordial soup over a span of 65 million years of just bacteria getting it on with other bacteria to create, different multi-celled organisms, right? If you breed a single cell bacteria with the same single cell bacteria, or if they just split off as far as their reproduction goes, the bacteria was still just a newer version of the old bacteria.
Sure, but then there's also the fact that bacteria work together as well as they become more likely. The ones that don't work well together get killed off. So we are basically
we are bacteria.
We are basically a collection of different single-celled organisms that work together perfectly.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for that shrew to pop out of my intestines.
The shrew just pops out of your anus, yeah.
Wait, why is there a shrew in your ass?
Because the bacteria is growing and it has to evolve.
Fair.
Yeah,
right?
Because evolution said it had to come out of their mic.
Yeah.
I am a
By the way,
believer,
welcome, Spicy.
I am a firm believer
Thank
that
you.
we are not the top of the food chain. Bacteria and viruses are.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we are not the top of the food chain. But just to your point of why don't, like, we are a collection of cells. A single cell, multitudes of a single cell create our skin cells. a multitude of a certain cell create an organ, and they all work in conjunction. They all get to survive because they work together in one single function, which is to allow us to survive as an organism. So you talk about when you have a single-celled organism in the soup, eventually that single-cell organism realizes, if I hang around with single-cell organisms just like me, I'm going to have a better chance of surviving, not out of a rational thought process, just because in that area where that single-cell organism was formed, other single-cell organisms also formed because of mitosis, which is how bacteria will reproduce. And as you have more and more collective of these same bacterias, eventually those bacterias can join together and create a bigger organism. That's the whole theory of evolution. So we're going from something that is a protein to an amino acid to something that can provide structure to a membrane wall to create a single cell organism. And those single cell organisms, as they reproduce, create more of themselves at a rate of, I mean, I'm just saying right now, in the present condition, it's 4 to 10 minutes. We don't know if it was faster back in the day because the climate was more rich in oxygen or whatever they needed to reproduce. And those single cell organisms then came together to create a multicellular organism, which even then, millions, hundreds of millions, thousands of millions of later became something that could even try to walk on land. Like, it's so far removed from when they first were created to the point where they actually became something that could take steps on land, that, like, to think that, statistically, it's not possible for something like that to happen doesn't make sense in the scope of 4.5 billion years, 22,500 times longer than we've been a human species on record.
Something that I want to bring up too that Tim said. So you were talking about an ape ancestor standing up. We'll talk about the Neanderthal thing a little bit later, because there's just a whole box to open up there. But so the way I look at it from all my education is everything that has led up to whatever an animal is now was not necessarily that the animal willed it into existence, right? So like a dog did not will its really good smelling into existence.
It needed it for survival.
Right. But the animal didn't know that it needed it for survival, right? I mean, we don't know what we need to survive longer as humans. There might be something that we could do. So going back to an ape ancestor standing up, who's to say? Because a lot of this stuff is a straight up mutation, right? Like just a freak thing that happened. Who's to say that there wasn't an ape ancestor that had a baby, and that baby, for whatever reason, had some sort of muscular deformity in its back, or maybe its spine was longer, whatever, and it was actually uncomfortable for it to walk on all fours. Like for us, that's uncomfortable. It is not easy for us to move around like a chimpanzee. It doesn't feel good at all. And so with that being said, although that animal saw everybody else in its group or whatever, assuming that that's what they did in the past, like they do now, was on all fours, and that's what it would have learned by seeing, it's like, man, this sucks. I'm going to stand up. And it probably felt better to it. All of a sudden now, you have a dude in the troop that can see the saber-toothed cat coming at you from a mile away, and not when it's 50 feet in front of you in the tall grass. Now, assuming that they have higher intelligence, like chimpanzees, gorillas, some other primates, right? They see that, and they're like, oh shit, that guy's pretty useful. I think I should bang him. I mean, like, I know it sounds weird, but it makes sense if you think about it in that animalistic view. Like, hey man, that dude's badass. I should fuck him. And all of a sudden now, maybe not all of his kids, but some of them have that trait, the same trait that he has. And now they start walking upright more than they're moving on their hands or on their feet and hands. And it would be slower than what I'm explaining, generations, right? But it's one of those things where it's like, it is a plausibility. We have humans that have deformities when they're born, and we see them as imperfections, but in a different world, in a different time, those could have actually been advantageous.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about dogs, right? So how do we go from wolves to chihuahuas, these little rat dogs, and these poodles, and all kinds of like this fucking vampire dogs that they have? But like, here's the thing: what we did is basically just speed up the process
through selective breeding.
Through selective breeding,
right?
But that's a choice that we made to create these vicious animals that are. I'm speaking specifically of chihuahuas. Fuck chihuahuas. These fucking yappy dogs, we decided we wanted them. But here's the thing, those wolves that were less dominant, that became more domesticated as they became closer to us, we could have just kept breeding them. They could have turned into something completely different.
I'm going to tell you right now, honestly, the wolves that are in existence today are hands down the badasses of wolf heredity, because
ones that never got tamed.
Yeah, we got the bitches, just straight up. We got the sissies of the wolf world.
So there's just a couple things. One, if it was scientifically proven that I came from an ape, I'm pretty disappointed that I don't have the strength per size ratio that an ape has.
We don't need it. We have this.
I think is pretty bullshit, because it'd be awesome to lift like 4 times my size. Secondly, like as far as like like polar bears and grizzly bears, through environmental reasons, have been coming to mate, just to help, because they're finally interacting with each other. But why wouldn't a zebra look at a giraffe and be like, man, it'd be nice to get up to those leaves? And then you have a zebra giraffe hybrid, right? It'd be biologically,
anatomically it's impossible for them.
It would be, but couldn't the thought process be there, like, man, like, I'm hungry and those leaves are way up there, I wish my neck was longer?
But you're giving a zebra too much credit, like, mentally, I think. I'm talking when I'm talking about an ape, when I was talking about an ape ancestor, I'm assuming they have higher intelligence than animals that are in existence today, such as zebras, deer, whatever.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Also, what you're saying, Gooch, is what he's talking about is crossbreeding between species. What evolution is breeding between the same species, just with evolutionary advantages. That's the difference.
Yeah,
so that chimpanzee that got the pick of the litter because he gets to stand up is still a chimpanzee, or whatever that early ancestor was. So breeding is still possible. If you breed between a giraffe and a zebra, it's just not possible, because its instinct is not to breed with another giraffe. Its instinct is to breed with a zebra. And now if the next zebra that gets born ends up being twice the size and turns out to be what we now know is a horse, then that breeding would create bigger and bigger and bigger zebras that eventually would turn into horses. I don't know if that's the evolutionary trail behind them. I'm not an expert on zebra fucking into horses, but I'm just
I mean, but you have the cross between donkeys and horses to get a mule, right?
That's not a naturally occurring thing.
No, but they wanted
in captivity
the strength of a horse, but the size of a donkey, because it was specifically like relative to what they needed. They needed a smaller horse strength donkey.
So
yeah, but that's not an evolutionary advantage.
I'm gonna keep going back to this shit, because this is my wheelhouse, man. So giraffes did start off
small,
as basically horses, but again, at one point in time, a giraffe's ancestor was born with a longer neck. Seems like it wouldn't be a good thing, right? And I'm not saying like it was a foot taller than everyone else. It may have just been a couple inches. But now all of a sudden, you can eat leaves that are just a little bit higher than everyone else. And you can survive a little bit longer than everyone else. And you can outcompete everyone else that has a 14-inch neck when you have an 18-inch neck, right? And so that means you're going to be more successful and you're going to breed.
Size matters.
Yeah, and you're going to breed. And then all of a sudden now everyone has 18-inch long necks. And then again, someone else gets a longer neck and they can do better and yada yada.
Lucky bastards.
I know. So
And
not to take away.
not all of these survive. You have to understand that evolution is a process where sometimes an evolution happens and it's not good for the animal and it dies and it doesn't get to breed. And sometimes an evolution is good, in which case it does survive and breed. So we're not talking about evolution as a positive thing every single time. Evolution takes back steps too. And it creates animals that may only survive in one climate. And then all of a sudden the climate changes and the other animals will survive that were the original species and the new animal will not survive. And then it starts all over again. But when you talk about the scale of this time happening, what Gooch is talking about is not happening in 10 years. What Gooch is talking about is happening in hundreds of years, hundreds of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years of trial and error that is creating these animals that then eventually turn into what we now have as modern day animals.
Species of the world are practicing eugenesis.
I guess.
Yeah, kind of. It's not that they're selecting it though. It's that.
But they are, right? A pack of wolves, right? The strongest male gets to mate with the females.
That's
a herd
okay,
of
fair.
lions. The strongest male mates with the females.
Fair. But
it's
does so in your eyes though, and I don't believe this to be the case, but do you think every strongest wolf has all of the best traits of a wolf? Because I bet you they don't. I guarantee you there's I bet you there's beta males out there that have way stronger bite forces that would be able to bite through bone. But the alpha is the alpha.
So then like birds, right? There are a lot of birds who are just a mating pair for life. Right? So at what point, like geese or swans, loons, many of those species will pair with another for the entirety of their life and just breed year after year with that one other.
Yeah, I mean, but you're not debunking the idea of evolution with that though, because that pair of swans can breed and maybe the 15th litter that they have has an abnormal swan that could be better at either feeding or hiding or camouflaging, or it just becomes advantageous. It doesn't mean that you can have two perfectly normal zebras that have calf after calf after calf after calf. That's a normal zebra, but it's that one calf that is genetically abnormal that ends up being the giraffe at the end. It's not about mating for life. You can mate for life and that's fine. The mating habits of an animal have no say in whether or not there's going to be a genetic abnormality. Humans can have 6 perfectly normal kids and then all of a sudden have a kid with Down syndrome. That's a possibility. And it happens on a day-to-day basis. That has no bearing on whether or not evolution can happen.
Oh no. Those are genetic anomalies that can occur. It's happened since people have been around, right? Back in Roman and Greek times, if baby had some physical abnormality, they would just set it outside of the city walls and let the wolves have at it.
I'm going to say because we're going to move to Spicy here because he has some shit to say. I can see it in his eyes. But I'm going to say something that's going to be controversial, but it might blow your heads a little bit. If there was a virus that attacked DNA, okay? But somehow, and I don't know how this would happen, I'm not a geneticist, nor am I a virologist. But if for some reason this virus was not able to attach to DNA that had a 23rd chromosome, Everyone with Down syndrome would survive, and we would all die. See what I'm saying? It's weird, and I know it's a very unlikely possibility, but in that very not so plausible, but also God knows what plausible situation, that could be one of those things where all of a sudden having a 23rd chromosome is advantageous because you just survived whatever this is. It's very strange to think about, and it's a weird way to put it, but it's a good way to kind of give shock and awe value to how quickly things can change in
Hey,
nature.
Gooch, so let's talk about malaria then.
Oh yeah, sickle cell disease.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing.
Same thing. You have a disease that affects normal red blood cells, but those that have sickle cell bloods will survive malaria at a higher rate than normal human beings. And those people that survive have a natural ability to not be affected by malaria. And
But
those
you
people that-
only it's only advantageous if you're heterozygous for it. If you're homozygous for the dominant, you will die from malaria. If you're
Yes.
homozygous for the recessive, or it might be flipped, I can't remember, it's one of the two. If you're homozygous for the recessive, which means you have both of those genes, all of your blood cells are shaped like that, and you live through immense pain. And it does affect African Americans the most.
Yes,
And
because it's malaria is more common in Africa, and that's where that
right.
genetic change happened. So let's say we had somebody with sickle cell and somebody that is normal, and they mate together, and then two of the kids get the dominant gene. Those
They
two
die.
kids will die, but the other two get the recessive gene will not die.
Right.
So those two kids that have the recessive gene will then end up having, say they have two kids of their own or four kids of their own, and then two of those kids also get the recessive gene, they'll be fine. So it multiplies over the course of the lifespan of whoever is breeding, and those kids are breeding. So you have more and more people in the populace that eventually become unaffected by malaria, which is still one of the biggest killers. Malaria is still one of the biggest killers out in the world right now, and it kills thousands of people per year. But as more and more people breed with that selective gene in their body, the more populace will be born with an born ability to resist the malaria virus. So that's
what would be an evolutionary backing for different blood types?
What do you mean, like having different types of blood types?
Yeah, A positive, AB positive, AB negative, B negative, O. Yeah, why have a difference?
Because we breed with different types of human beings.
But like, so my mom was born, she has a different blood type than my grandma did. So she had to have a blood transfusion after she was born because my grandma's blood was incompatible with my mom at that certain time. I think that's how it went. I don't know. I just know like there was something that occurred there. My mom had different blood type.
Yeah, everybody in my family is B negative, but I'm O negative.
So blood types are determined by the presence or absence of certain antigens. This is coming directly from Google. These substances can trigger an immune response if they are in contact with a foreign body. So, it just kind of depends, I would say, from your... that would actually be an example of the environment probably directly affecting what you come out to be.
That's a similar saying, why is this person white and this person black? Why is this
it's an
person
environmental thing, right? Like Europeans are white, typically blue eyes, larger, like longer noses. Africans are, of course, darker skin, brown eyes, more like shorter compressed noses, right? Europeans need the longer nose to heat air before it enters the lungs because they live in a cooler climate. So if you're looking evolutionary, I think environmental factors more so than the creature's determination to manipulate
literally
the
just
environment.
backed evolution, though. Evolution is the species adapting to the environment And that's the whole process. The species adapt to the environment, the different climates, and after breeding, the ones that had longer noses, the ones that could survive in those areas, ended up breeding and creating the Caucasian, the Asian, the Indian, the African. That's evolution.
Because it allowed the species to survive, just like a freshwater fish can't survive in saltwater, right? It's literally the same thing. As a Northern European person is more likely to survive in a colder climate than they would in like the Sahara Desert, right? I couldn't survive in the Sahara Desert with redheads, fair skin. I would literally probably get skin cancer in like months.
Exactly. So the breeding
Right?
of people that in that area that could survive in that area. So the environment that you're in makes a huge difference in evolution. If you live in an area and you need to adapt to that area, the ones that are born with the ability to survive best in that area will breed and create more.
Here's right. So Christianity, being Christian, you still have to, you can't deny evolutionary facts, right? Because you can literally see it. There are different races depending geographically in which they are able to thrive better, which would stem from the Tower of Babel when everyone was dispersed. Through those generations that would have occurred would have allowed those more, it's not really a macro or a micro evolutionary change to better suit their geographical positioning. I mean, that happens because
that's microevolution. Absolutely, it's microevolution because
the
species as itself is still human, but the characteristics that are changing from area to area is minor. The change from black skin to white skin is a minute difference in your genetic code. So that's microevolution, can happen in a short period of time. Macroevolution takes forever.
I fully believe the microevolutionary process because I am an evolution of my parents without a dispute. Genetically, genealogically, that's a scientific fact. The issue I have is that I don't think the timeline would line up with 6.5 billion years with all the catastrophic events between the creation of Earth to today could have by chance happened within a Goldilocks zone for every potential statistical anomaly to occur to be a fully functional, thought processing, language speaking mammal.
But you're acting like everything happens in a Goldilocks zone. It doesn't have to be a Goldilocks zone.
So why isn't there life outside of a Goldilocks zone? Why isn't there life on Jupiter?
There's animals that live in areas that no other organism can survive.
Not on Jupiter. It's outside of an habitable zone that we know.
As far as we know, there could be. There's no way for us to say otherwise. If we have stuff that lives in the bottom of the ocean, feeding off sulfur that comes from sulfur vents in areas that no other organism can survive, there is an ability for life to survive anywhere. We have not seen life on Jupiter because we haven't been there. We haven't tested anything. It's a gaseous planet. So anything that lives in that planet is going to be in the atmosphere, feeding off of whatever's in the atmosphere. It's more likely we'll find something on Jupiter's moons, such as Titan, which actually has a hard rock structure that something can actually live on the actual terrain of. But there's no way for us to know that because we haven't been able to go there and test it yet.
Even Mars. Right, we have scientific drones like Curiosity out there doing sample analysis, core digging.
We can do basic analysis though. We can't check to see if there's life on something. We can check to see what it's made of in terms of the materials in it. It's a simple machine. We can't go in and have the machine go in and look through a microscope at what's in it and figure out whether or not if there's a living organism in it.
So then, I mean, I guess that really depends too on evolution. At what point is something considered life?
I mean, that's a different
fair
thing
argument
altogether. Yeah, because evolutionary,
evolutionary, a tree is life. right? A tree is a multi-cell organism. A single cell bacteria is life. So what constitutes life?
It depends on what your definition is. Does it have to be a single cellular organism to be life?
I'd
If
say
you
being
think of-
alive is a good standpoint.
Does it require free thought? Does it require ability to have
Well-
instinct? Because the early iterations of just proteins it was all based on chemical reactions. All the proteins know are chemical reaction. Whether or
And-
not this molecule will bind with this molecule is not based on the protein choosing. It's whether or not it gets
And-
close enough to another molecule and binds.
That's all humans are, though, are just chemical and electrical reactions. A thought is an electrical process. So does that mean,
Absolutely.
so at what point is life? Because if you're going to speak evolution, maybe we're not alive. Maybe this isn't life.
No, you're derailing the conversation. Evolution
But-
and life have different connotations. We're talking about whether or not what we believe life is. That has no connotation on the evolutionary process. We can debate whether or not this is life or that is life. We're talking about the evolutionary process going from a soupy material full of atoms and molecules and materials turning into whatever. You can decide for yourself what stage at that point is life. That's your personal decision. We're talking about, so there's three different types of truths. There's actual empirical truth, there is personal truth, and then there's also what is the third one? Oh God, I'm sorry. I know there's three different truth that you believe in, which can be whatever you decide life is. There's a truth of whether or not evolution exists, which is based on research done, or there's the truth that whether or not you believe whatever everyone else is deciding for you. So what is the truth for you? Whether or not where life is has no bearing on whether or not evolution can happen. Because if you're talking about, you like you said, when you said statistically it's not possible for macro evolution to happen in the span of 4.5 million years, I showed you how a bacteria can, even with 5 million trillion bacteria, if they're multiplying at a rate of every 4 to 10 minutes, there's a lot of statistical possibility for a different variety to happen.
I mean, I know you used COVID as an example because everybody, has become a scientist, a Google scientist. So yeah, within 2 years, it's gone from something that was pretty severe to something that's kind of more like a common cold, right? But COVID, from the original strain to the Omicron strain to whatever other bullshit that it's going to turn into in the next 10, 15, 20, 100 years, it's still an origin of its original design.
Yes, that's
Right.
microevolution. It
Yeah.
involves small edits in the DNA. So if you say that bacteria
Through
is
it.
life, if you say bacteria is life, does us fighting off this virus equal killing life?
Are
Are you asking if it's a genocide?
I mean,
Are we
I
committing
just dropped the
genocide
fucking
right now?
mic, dude. I just dropped the fucking mic on that argument.
yeah, I mean, using a disinfectant it's like let's say Lysol, right? Everybody knows Lysol. It kills 99.9% of bacteria on surfaces. Yeah, okay, you're creating a genocide of bacteria. Nobody really cares because you'd rather have a clean surface than a dirty one, right?
Lysol.
Be insensitive.
Better
of
than
it.
Yeah.
Hitler.
But the the problem is that
It's got a higher batting rate than
Yeah.
Hitler.
No, but the problem is though, is that right? COVID is still going to be COVID in 300 years. The flu is still the flu in that time. AIDS is still AIDS in that time. The bacteria in my gut will be the bacteria in my gut until I die.
No, because that's not how it works. Because COVID is a macro evolution of the SARS virus.
Created
The
from
SARS
a lab,
Well, yeah, I'm not going to argue with you on regarding whether it was created, in a
which
lab
was
or
a
not.
macro evolution
like it was
process.
a macro evolution process because the SAR virus it's part of the family, but
Yeah,
it's a
there's
bigger
a
away.
cold
it's
is
a bit
part of
away from-
SARS and flu.
Yeah, so those are different variations of it. Now, COVID can remain COVID as it is, but all of a sudden, COVID mutates, goes back into becoming an absolute monster of a killer, and then it'll go down its own evolutionary train and become something else.
Yeah, created by a lab in Boston. Did you see that one?
Oh God! All right, listeners,
80% mortality rate.
we don't absolutely agree with this. This
No,
is his opinion based
no.
on what it is.
Yeah, okay. I mean, because so specifically of mutations and macro, a lab in Boston took the original COVID virus that was really deadly, right? And put it with Omicron, which is easily spreadable, and they put them together and it killed 8 of 10 rats.
First off, don't be fucking with this shit. Who are you to be fucking with this shit?
So no, like you can look that up, you can
At
research
this point,
it, like
literally,
it
why
actually
would you do
happens.
this?
Yeah, no, but I just want to say, like, that's not something I believe. That's actually like scientifically happened. So
Yeah,
I'd like
I mean,
that
that's
at
an
least
experiment.
retracted.
As our brains are able to comprehend what is happening in the world, which no other animal really can do like humans, we are able to play
that
around.
we know of.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, apes are starting to use tools. They're
From, like,
entering the Stone Age.
Dolphins and other things are much more
Yeah,
intelligent than we
There's
initially
proof
thought.
that apes, dude, freaking crows are using human beings in cars to break the nuts so that way they can access it faster.
All right,
Like,
did you know though, like crows, you can train crows in like ravens. So if they start bringing you coins and then you give them food, they'll start like bringing you more coins.
Ravens and crows have the ability for speech too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they have the ability like parrots do. They just have never been trained to do so.
Yeah.
It's freaking weird, man.
But what we're doing as a human species is we're speeding up the process. We understand how the mechanics work. We understand how we got here based on the theory of evolution. And we're using the theory of evolution to prove that it exists by creating these super crows or creating these dogs.
Oh, God, don't say that.
We used Darwin's theory of evolution and basically are able to create the world into what we... Now, you say, why aren't we evolving? Why aren't we evolving is because we have the ability to control our environment. We have the ability to play around with what's around us and suit it to whatever we need. We took badass wolves and turned them into these fucking rat dogs that nobody wants. Fuck you if you have a Chihuahua. They shouldn't exist. Fuck you if you have a bulldog. Bulldogs want to die, okay? You literally
you
bred
can hear
a dog.
it with every breath.
Yeah, you literally bred a dog with inbuilt asthma. It wants to die. It doesn't want to be here. And we've decided as a human species that we want him here. So evolution, the fact that we're able to take these animals and turn them into what we have, the fact that we're able to take bison and wild buffalo and turn them into cows, the fact that we can take, mountain goats and turn them into domesticated goats is proof that evolution is possible at a faster rate because humans are around, but it'll happen at a slower rate even if we weren't around.
See, I would just love to live for another 65 million years to see if it's all true.
Now we could. One of the common things that people talk about is the integration of AI and human intellect. That could be our next evolution, but that's a self-made
Dear
evolution.
God, please no.
But an argument against AI, though, is that it cannot perceive the world around it. It can't do more than it's instructed.
Yes, but we're talking about the integration of the human brain with AI, the human consciousness with
AI.
like
the little chip that like Elon Musk wants to
pretty
put in
much.
people's
Yes,
heads.
yeah. So we're basically we'll have the human intellect to make choices, but with the backing of AI to do computations at a scale that we've never seen before.
It'll be like
Literally
altered carbon with the sleeves.
Yeah.
Literally 3
Awesome
Terminator
show, by the
movies
way.
and 2 other offshoots that say why we probably shouldn't do this.
I mean,
Oh.
just like all the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World movies are like, just because we can do something doesn't mean we should, right?
No,
like
and
creating a
life
super
always
deadly
finds a way.
virus.
Like literally that saying in Jurassic Park is the explanation of how we are as it is. Life finds a way. You can decide whatever parameters you want to set on something and it will still escape. Imagine if COVID was designed in a lab. COVID was designed in a lab in a secure environment where it was supposed to be able to be tested on. It still found a way to get out.
Thanks, China.
You don't control this. We have the idea that we are in control of everything around us, and that is the folly of man. We will kill ourselves
And
because we don't understand how powerful nature is.
and I,
We think that we can survive everything that's happening. We are not in control. We are pawns in whatever is happening on this planet.
and I think also another fallacy of man too. I was listening to a podcast. Dr. Jordan Peterson was talking with a guy who is I can't remember his name, but he's like he was studied Islam and he's technically like a Muslim cleric, but he is allowed by the Muslim church to go out and like speak to people like Dr. Peterson, who is not a Muslim, right? To try and scientifically and like faith-based different things, right? So from my understanding from the podcast, like Muhammad would, and most of the stuff in the Quran is very factual based, right? It didn't exist unless there's evidence. Things didn't happen unless it was proven. And Christianity is like, when Christianity intertwines with science and like evolutionary processes, is that we can have the science to say that XYZ occurred, but beyond this certain point, we have the faith that these things happened. Like one thing, like I think aliens are really like the prospect, even being a Christian and believing in creationism, the prospect that there's potentially other life out there fascinates me, right? And people be like, well, as a Christian, like God only started humans out with Adam and Eve, and we got to here. It's like, yeah, but it's God or an intelligent design. Like maybe we're just an experiment. Maybe he has other solar systems with other life that he created. I can't prove it. No one can, just as no one can prove Big Bang Theory happened or the spaghetti monster's a real thing. Like
I am more likely to I will take that explanation of God starting an experiment and just letting it go wherever it wants to go. I can understand that more than just like God designed every animal that exists on the planet to be the way it is, versus God just being like, here's a planet, here's a soup of shit, let's see what happens. Like that makes more sense to me. That sounds more like what I could believe in, because it's basically him getting all the criteria, everything that we need is in this little soup and in this little planet. Let's see what happens. That I can understand more than basically just like 2,000 years ago, God decided these animals were going to be here and these are animals that we as humans can use.
It'll be more like 10 to 15,000, like 2,000.
I'm sorry.
Jesus would have been born about 2,000 years ago.
Based on who I talked to, she said it was like 2,000 years.
Yeah,
I'm not
and
gonna
see,
say
like
names or anything.
I think those people are like, a little out there more so than like somebody's like, oh yeah, the Big Bang happened and believed it with their whole heart. Like you can look back chronologically and be like, oh yeah, like if you're going 80 BC type thing, Jesus was born and that was year 0 whatever, so it's been 2022 years since then. But I guess just the process that like creationary God created the creatures on the world, not specifically saying God created German shepherds, but God created the ability for humans to breed animals, right? Genesis 26, I believe, when God talks, or in the Bible, it talks about like taking out your bow and arrow and going to hunt animals, right? So there would be other species out there to hunt, and people being people, good for bad, the people that decided that chihuahuas were a good thing determined those facts, right? They determined that's what they wanted, so they created it upon the material they had with them, right? So they had whatever dogs and whatever shit line went down the hole to create a chihuahua. right, or a pug, there's no scientific fact that can tell me God didn't create the cornerstones for humans to manipulate their environment.
Well, I guess that's a belief-based thing, right? So if you believe that is the set, like, because for me, I am a science-based person. I will always believe what can be proven via science over what can be proven via text and religion. And me and Tim can go at this all for the entirety of the 2 hours.
I want to give Spicy some time.
Yeah, like I want to give Spicy some time, because me and Tim, like, we'll still talk about this all the time. We'll still be friends after. I want people to understand that we're going to talk about this, and it might seem like we're getting heated at each other. It's not that. Me and him, like, we have thought about this. Everyone here has thought about this, and we will all have this discussion in a heated manner, but still be friends after. So nobody should be listening to this thinking that we're going after each other's throats. As always, everyone, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Drunk with Questions.
Drunk with Questions wouldn't be possible without incredibly ordinary individuals such as yourselves. Make sure you join the Drunk with Questions crew every Sunday on your preferred podcast streaming website. Don't forget to like, follow, comment, and subscribe on all of our social media pages. And feel free to reach out to us by email at any time.